Hey everyone, it's actually Jeb Bush, and in this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some potential future cheat codes on NBA SoRare. Currently, we are in the midst of the NBA All-Star break and the NBA SoRare All-Star contests. As a result, any player that doesn't qualify for these All-Star contests on NBA SoRare are taking a bit of a hit in the marketplace. So while everyone's focused on these contests and buying up those players, I think it is a perfect time to take a look at some potential future cheat codes and maybe get a really good deal on the marketplace right now as you re-up for the second half of the NBA season. Now, previously, we would dedicate an entire video looking at one NBA team. And one of the big reasons was because we knew the trade deadline was coming up. Well, now that that's passed, I think it's a lot easier to run through multiple teams and multiple situations. And so moving forward, we're just going to kind of take a look at a snapshot of the season and try to predict some really good potential future cheat codes. The main purpose of these videos is still the same. We want to find these players while they're cheap and no one is paying attention to them so we can scoop them up and be in the best position for when they are considered a cheat code for an optimal lineup and a must have. Then we can create our own lineup and try to get one of the higher end prizes or sell the pump and take profit. Either way, we want to be in a situation where we are not buying one of these players at the top and then having to deal with the crash afterwards. Now, before we take a look at the list I've prepared, if you could just take a second to make sure you hit the like button on this video and that you're subscribed to the channel. It's something very easy and small that you can do that really helps me out a lot, and it is deeply appreciated. Also, if you're into the NBA or DFS and you don't have an NBA SoRare account, you can actually create an account using this link right here. That is my affiliate link, and it will give you 20 free common cards to use for the common contests. Additionally, if you buy 5 limited or higher tier cards on the new card auction marketplace, you'll get a 6th one airdrop to you for free, but that's only if you use my link below in the description. Now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at these SoRare cheat codes. Now that the trade deadline is over and the dust has settled a bit, I think the best players to target are players on teams that identified as sellers this season. And I think one of the few teams we knew would be a seller before the season even started was the Spurs, which look a little bit different now that they traded away Jakob Poeltl. I think the Spurs have a lot of players that are worth taking dart throws on or targeting because we know there's going to be a lot of players getting benched constantly as the Spurs actively and aggressively tank in order to try and get Wembanyama. So we're starting off with the most obvious one, and that is Zach Collins. We identified Zach Collins before the trade deadline as a prime target, and we were right. He pumped to like $30 when he was sitting at about 10, and he put up some really great SoRare scores if you had him in one of your lineups. But as we can see, he's basically gone all the way back to $10, which means he's a good pickup again with a cap of 23 and a ceiling that he's shown of hitting a 50 or a 60. I'm not going to pull up his details since we've talked about him in previous videos, but I do think Zach Collins is kind of an obvious target and a player at the very least that you should be watching and tracking his cap and relative price. Next, I want to talk about Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and Jeremy Sohan. I think all three are kind of in a similar basket here. They're all starters, and they'll all benefit from increased usage that is available after Jakob Poeltl left. Sohan being the most expensive, I think, is probably the one that is not really worth picking up right now. But once again, worth tracking, paying attention to his cap and his price. You know, if he dips closer to 15 and his cap is in the low 20s, I feel like that's kind of an automatic scoop. He's really shown a lot of potential and put up some great SoRare scores over the course of the first half of the season. Devin Vassell is coming back from injury, and I think he will be very, very good. I think he'll put up some very high scores. I currently don't own a Vassell. I owned one earlier in the season before he got injured, but I do think I will probably be scooping one up before games start back up regularly again post All-Star break, because we do know he's coming back soon. And then Keldon Johnson has been known to have some pretty impressive ceiling games. Once again, I'm not going to pull any of these guys up because I don't think it's worth doing a deep dive. I just think it's worth checking their prices, keeping track of their cap. And if it just makes sense to pull the trigger, I'd say go for it because there will be times where these players are great plays. However, it's important to note that, like we said before, these players will for sure get benched as the season goes on and the Spurs try to tank. So being dependent upon one of these guys and having them as your go-to guy is not necessarily the best strategy because there might be a lot of game weeks, especially as the season comes to an end, where players on the Spurs have 2 games for that game week. But you'll be lucky if these players play one of those games, much less two. So I think it's a little dangerous to be super dependent on them, but they're very interesting. They're very interesting players to watch. And the Spurs in general have a lot of minutes and usage up for grabs, where really, if any player gets hot, they could just be fed the ball all day. Now, there's 2 players here. We're going to dive into the details a little more. But before we do, I just really quickly want to highlight that I think, Bates Diop, Trey Jones, Romeo Langford, and Isaiah Roby are all players that are kind of worth, paying attention to, looking at their cap, looking at their price. Someone like Roby, who's down to $2, might be worth taking a dart throw, while someone maybe like Trey Jones, who is closer to 10, might be someone you want to wait on. I would say all these guys are just worth keeping an eye on, tracking their caps, tracking their prices, and taking dart throws as you go. However, the 2 players that I really want to highlight on the Spurs that I think have a lot of potential, similar to the Zach Collins potential we were talking before the trade deadline, are Malachi Branham and Devontae Graham. All right, so Malachi Branham is sitting at $12 to $13. He is a cap of 23. And in these last 10 games, we can see that he's averaged almost 30 minutes per game while putting up somewhat decent stats, nothing to write home about, nothing spectacular. However, this 30 minutes per game is what really interests me. Malachi Branham is just clearly getting a lot of run now that there is a lot more minutes in usage, like we said before. And if we take a look at his chart, we can see that he's kind of just slowly continued to trend upwards, like generally speaking. Every dip is higher than the previous dip or at the same level. Like he is not losing a lot of value here. I think this is really interesting, and we can even see some serious verticality like 3 or 4 times here as well. I just think there's a lot of upside with Malachi Branham, both on the profits end as well as the playing end. I think he's shown some real potential, some real flashes where you're like, oh, okay, he could have a serious ceiling game, and I think maybe he's not worth buying right now because, as you can see, the peak here is like $17. So 12 doesn't get you a lot of room to run there. So maybe you wait till he's below 10 before you go scooping him up. But I think he's a player that's really worth watching. If we take a look at some of his scores, we can see that pretty much like since the trade deadline recently, as he's gotten more minutes, he's put up some pretty solid outings. We have a 40, some high 30s here. And I think he will continue to perform as he's given more minutes and he kind of just gets used to his new role on the team. So I think Malachi Branham's a very interesting watch. Like I said, personally, I don't own one right now. And I may want to buy one, but I'm not going to buy one right now because I think his price is way too close to his like all-time high. But yeah, I really like Malachi Branham. I think he's a very interesting person to watch specifically. And then the other player, like we said, is Devontae Graham. Now, we took a look at Devontae Graham's details before the trade deadline, and I usually don't pull a player up if we've already taken a bit of a deep dive on them. But the reason I wanted to take a look at Devontae Graham is, as you can see, he has this absolute moonshot here. We're seeing multiple stretches here of verticality. And we can see he peaked at $26, which is absolutely insane considering before he was traded, you could get him like just dirt cheap. Like people are getting him for $2 or $3. So that's a 10 to 13x right there pretty easily. And since then, he's obviously come back down to earth as we know he would. But I think what also makes him so interesting on top of this crazy price spike and this crazy ceiling that we've seen is if we look at his scores, Devontae Graham has really performed. He dropped a 45, which I believe was in double overtime, so it's a little skewed. But two 30s and a 45 in the 4 games he's played since he's been traded is pretty significant. And if you've watched those games at all, you'll know that Devontae Graham is just chucking. He has the green light and he is never afraid to take a shot. There's never a shot he sees that he doesn't like. It is important to know that Devontae Graham is the backup point guard. So I wouldn't recommend just going out and buying 50 Devontae Grahams or anything like that. But this is the type of player we're looking for, a player that based on an injury or a benching or whatever happens, where they get a significant jump in minutes in usage and are able to drop a 45 and have like a crazy ceiling game and cause a massive supply shock where we see a massive jump. Do I think Devontae Graham is going to hit, you know, $26 again? No, probably not. But if you're buying him at, $4 or $5, flipping him for 12 to 15 is totally within the ballpark here. All right. So, like I said, the Spurs were a team that we knew were sellers from the beginning. I think the other huge team was the Nets, who no one thought were going to be sellers, but ended up being probably the biggest sellers of the season. And as a result, their whole team is completely different. And I just think there's a lot of market inefficiencies that might be worth exploring here before people catch up and these prices as a result go up. So the first player I want to take a look at is Mikal Bridges. All right, so Mikal Bridges is sitting at about $20 to $25. He's got a cap of 37, has plenty of minutes per game. And if you have watched the new Nets with Mikal Bridges, I think it's pretty obvious that he is now the focal point of that team. However, you wouldn't necessarily know that looking at his price. And yes, I know $23 is not this super crazy cheap deal. There are plenty of other like high caliber players you can get below that. I know you can get a Franz Wagner for like $17 right now, which seems a bit cheap. But Mikal Bridges just had an absolute ceiling game and kind of gave us a taste of what could be to come. As we can see, throughout the whole season, he's really performed. Plenty of 48s and 50s. He had a 62 here. However, on his new team, he dropped a 72. And if we take a look at this, he dropped 45 points in 36 minutes. He had 6 blocks and 6 steals. Mikal Bridges is one of the best two-way players in the NBA. He is an elite first-team All-NBA defender. He is the Swiss Army knife that every team that is trying to make a championship run would want. But he's never really been in the position where he's the guy. And granted, this is one game. We can't overreact, which is why his price is not, $50, $60. But if I'm going to take a dart throw, spending $20 on a dart throw for a guy who could become my like go-to MVP in a champion lineup seems like a pretty great dart throw to take. And worst case scenario, if he doesn't turn into that, I don't think his price takes an incredible hit. If we look at his price chart here, he's not really that inflated. Before this little spike he got, he was sitting at like $18. So this is a $5 little pump based on him putting up a 72. So if you want to wait for it to go to 20 or a little below that, I think that's fine. Like I said, we're in the midst of an all-star break, and pretty much any player who is not an all-star or participating in the skills contests, we're seeing a little bit of a dip. We can even see it right here. The last game he's played was a 72 on SoRare, and he's still getting a small little dip here where we're seeing people getting him for like 20 almost. So if you want to wait a little and see if you can get him a little cheaper, I think that totally makes sense. But I don't think there's any world where his value falls off a cliff. I think this is an incredibly safe dart throw with an incredible amount of upside. And, worst case scenario, you have a player that when his cap dips a little bit lower, you might be able to fit him into some lineups as your second or third option if you have a champion lineup. So I really like Mikal Bridges for lineup builds and for a potential pump if he continues to perform like he does on the Nets. And we know that at this point, it really seems like he's the guy, he's the go-to guy, he's the focal point of that offense, and he's incredible on defense. So someone who can score on both ends of the floors for SoRare is huge. And I love Mikal Bridges. I will be buying one soon for sure. Two players that I think are interesting that we're not going to dive super deep into are Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie. We talked about DFS in our Dallas Mavericks So Rare Steals video, so I don't think it's really worth diving too deep into him. His price is still pretty low, and he might be worth a dart throw there. Spencer Dinwiddie has proven this season that if he is made the go-to guy based off an injury or someone resting, he has a pretty significant ceiling there. However, the one problem is the go-to guy on the Nets is a guy that does not miss games. Mikal Bridges has not missed a basketball game since high school. He is currently on pace to play 83 out of 82 games this season, which is another reason why I think Mikal Bridges is an incredible dart throw and someone that's really worth picking up after they've shown such an incredible so rare ceiling. I think Cam Johnson is someone that might be worth watching. If the price is right and his cap is low, he might be worth trying to scoop up and maybe flipping for a higher amount as he becomes more of an appealing play for a certain lineup. Cam Johnson is good on both sides of the floor, which is huge. But the Nets have a lot of wings. They have a lot of depth at his position, and I don't see him having a opportunity for a lot of ceiling games moving forward, especially since it seems like the Nets are trying to be competitive. And once again, like I said, we'll be going through Mikal Bridges as their number one guy. The last person I have on my list is Edmund Sumner. I believe we talked about him in the Brooklyn Nets So Rare Steals video already. He's dirt cheap. I think he's worth a dart throw. He's shown some promise. He's had some decent games. Someone worth watching. Might not hurt to just pick up one or two because how much lower can he really go when he is on an active roster and is getting consistent minutes? All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. We've covered a lot. I do have 6 more teams that I want to talk about, so I think I'm going to have a part 2 and maybe even a part 3 to this video. But I think once we've covered all of this post trade deadline, it'll be a lot easier to point out just a couple future cheat codes moving forward in a single video. So, if you're interested, feel free to go and check that video out. I will link it below in the description, and it should be on my YouTube channel as well. But otherwise, thanks for coming and checking out this video. I hope you found it informative and interesting, and hopefully it helped you fill out your collection a bit more with some players that have a lot of opportunity to pop both in the marketplace and in a so rare lineup. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you haven't created an NBA so rare account, make sure to use the link in the description below, and we'll see you guys next video. Please clap.